Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, welcome to this podcast. In this podcast, I'm going to talk about the placement of Venus in Aquarius. And I'm going to start by delineating what Venus is. And as with all my other podcasts on the Venus functional light, Venus is a vector. And it is that aspect of our consciousness that allows us to decide or to choose what it is that we like. And the process of choice is always the same. It involves sampling. And that's what Venus does. It's your connection to reality. And as human beings, we connect to reality via our sense organs. So we're talking about the sense of sight, vision, the sense of audition, which is a sense of hearing, or the sense of olfaction, which is our sense of smell, the sense of taste or gustation, and the sense of touch or tactition. Now, the important thing about these sense organs is that that's the way we couple to a reality. Without the input from these sense organs, we might as well be brains in a jar. Because the sense organs allow us to know that there is a reality and that we are part of it. So that you can look at these sense organs as integrations into reality. But if you have to be genuine about what you're looking at, you will immediately realize that these sense organs are no different from the reality that they are experiencing. And it has to be so that there is a seamless flow of information between whatever that reality is supposed to be and what it is that you are picking up and how you are picking it up. The idea is to create a continuous spectrum in some sense, so that there's really no distinction. Now, whatever that reality is, right, whatever it is really made of, or however it is formed, we cannot know except through these sense organs. So if you switch off all your sense organs, then how do you know that you are? How do you know that you are alive? You need a reality. And if you've been listening to my podcast, I always equate these realities to narratives. Because the thing that is really being acquired by these sense organs is a narrative. And in order to be able to formulate the type of narrative that a reality is, you need to be able to populate that narrative, meaning that the actual narrative is coming from you, some way or somehow. You are populating the narrative that you call a reality. And these sense organs simply validate this population. Now, if you have a dissonance between the population and the sense organs, that's the nature of insanity. So every wakeful moment, what we are doing is we are constantly reconciling the internal narrative that is emanating from our state of conviction, right, with what we consider to be an external reality. And this is very important when we meet people. Whenever we meet people, because people carry realities. Every human being carries a reality in their head, which is their own story, the narrative they're telling themselves. Alright? And the interesting thing about these narratives is that they're not taking place from one point in the human. They're taking place as part of an infinite spectrum. So at every layer of your existence, and its infinity, at every layer of that, there is a narrative. The deeper that narrative goes, the less you are in control of it. Until you get to the point where, for instance, you are a single cell in your body. A single cell that is taking instructions from its environment and responding in a very complex manner. Yet, you cannot reconcile your self-consciousness to that single cell. Because there are 50 trillion of them on average in your body. So which one exactly are you? The sense of self that you experience is only available on an aggregate level. That is, each of these, you have maybe 85 billion neurons in your brain. And so those neuronal cells are wired to every other part of your body. So you can imagine them as an aggregate center. And that's exactly what one of the function of your thalamus in your head. It kind of aggregates all these sense organs into one point, so that it is from there that you now begin to feel a sense of self. But what it really is an aggregation from trillions and trillions of inputs that are being generated on a micro level or a cellular level. And it goes beyond that, because the cell is just molecular machinery. And then you get to the level of molecules, and then you get to the level of atoms, and then you get to the level of subatomic particles. So which one really are you? The answer is that you are everything. Because what you are is organized complexity. It's a scheme. It's an organizational strategy. Human existence is the process by which that strategy comes together into a being that can now sense an environment. But at every layer of this beingness, as I've described it from subatomic level all the way to the aggregate that you are, there is a narrative associated with all of it. That's really what it is. On the level of that aggregate, where you experience a sense of self, right? You are using that sense of self to try to determine where you want to go, what you want to do. That process of determining what you want to do or where you want to go, that's the Venusian instinct. That's the Venusian functional light. And the idea is that on an aggregate level like that, if you can perceive what you like or where you want to go, then you can use that to sculpt the narrative on that level. Because for instance, if you like, if you like fruits, for instance, okay, so whenever you see where there are fruits, it is most natural for you to gravitate towards that direction, to go in that direction. Now, there's a reason why you like what you like, because that Venusian function is not alone. It is in a complex harmonic relationship with everything else in your natal chart, which is basically a way of saying everything else in your psychology. Because on that level, on that aggregate level, you experience yourself as one. Okay? That's the whole point of bringing all that information together from trillions and trillions of places and then aggregating it so that you perceive it as a sense of oneness. There's a reason for that. Because that sense of oneness, that is the divinity that is within you. And the essence of that divinity that you perceive within you, that oneness that you perceive within you, is so that you can perceive that oneness external of you. And by perceiving that oneness external of you, evil disappears from the world. Because you realize that the external reality is you. That's the essence. That's the reason why you are made in the way that you are made. And so that's what natal chart synthesis is. It's not analysis. It's the synthesis of everything together, bringing it all together and understanding it on that aggregate level. Because it's on that level, it is more than the sum of its parts. And the Venusian function is that vector that emerges from that points you in a particular direction. Because it is a sum total of everything else coming together to determine what it is that you like. So that instinct of what I like is meant to lead you to your destiny. It's meant to lead you to the reason why you are here. That's why the sign of Taurus, that's Venus rules, right, is extremely important, because outside of Aries, which is just the entry into a reality, that is the bursting forth into a reality, well, that bursting forth needs to be implemented as something. It needs to take form, structure. It needs a direction. Because Aries doesn't have any direction. Alright? It's just the readiness to act and the energy available to act. But it is the Venus that gives you the direction. Just imagine a 360-degree sphere. A three-dimensional sphere. From the center of the sphere, there are almost an infinite number of possible directions that the arrow can point to. How do you know which one is yours? Or how do you know where you're supposed to go? But that Venusian function is what tells you which direction you're supposed to go. And if you come to understand it, it is listening to everything else in your life, everything else in your natal chart. Is giving that Venus what it wants. And so the Venus comes about as the way that you like to be loved in one instance. It also means the way that you enjoy pleasure. And the pleasure instinct is your biology telling you that this is what is best for you. Because in order to get to that level, it is summing the input of trillions and trillions and trillions of connections. Just to be able to aggregate it to the level where you can understand it as a singular vector. And so, do you know the implication of going against that vector? Of literally going in the opposite direction? You harm yourself. You harm yourself. You harm your life. You harm your path forward. And usually these types of going against your vector, it's usually hard-coded in the natal chart because it's probably tied to something else that you need to experience. Because of the very important nature of that Venusian vector, right? A lot of life lessons are always tied to it. Because it is the beginning of the journey. Think about getting out of your house. You want to go somewhere. Well, how do you know whether you need to go left or right or up or down or wherever? You don't know once that Venus is malfunctioning. But once you know where you're supposed to go and you can understand it and feel it very clearly, then that agreement is a harmonization of all your life. Because in order to produce that Venusian instinct, everything is harmonized within you. That is, the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of data points, they are harmonized and synchronized. And that's why you experience it as pleasure. And so when a human being is born, they are born with this instinct already within them. Do you know, in the last trimester of pregnancy, you know how much construction is taking place in the brain. And when the child is born, then a recalibration begins to take place almost immediately, because there are too many connections already laid down. Some will not be needed. So that the point of birth, the ascendant, begins to recalibrate the potential that the individual is already born with. And the reason why it's doing that is so that it can narrow down on the vector, because you are born into a reality system that is supposed to trigger that vector immediately. And that is why the infant child is born with the aptitude for suckling, because that is Venus, that is Taurus. The first instinct is the sense of taste. That's really what it is. That sense of taste is the one that lights up or leads the other senses into that calibration. Because what's really going on is what I like, what I don't like. And what you like is what you tend to move towards. And once you have significant placements of Venus or Taurus or whatever, then the work being done is you need to find all those things that you like and create a datum, which is a fixed reference point for pleasure. And then you plant your flag there, and that's it. It's a process that happens very early naturally, right? But most people with significant placements in Taurus or with Venus very prominent in their natal, right? When they find this datum, they fix it there and it doesn't move anymore. Why should it? Because it is the first thing that you really understand. So what are you moving it to? That's why people who have significant placements in Taurus, they don't move. They're very obstinate. Because why? Why should they? They sample a lot of information before they actually find that sweet spot. And that sweet spot acts as a guidance for them for everything they have ever done. So why should they move? Alright? So that is the Venusian quality. It's a very wonderful quality in the human, because it's not just a sense of pleasure. There's meaning attached to that pleasure, because that pleasure point, that sense of pleasure, which starts with a sense of taste, really. Okay? So respect your tongue. It's one of the things that first informed you of the type of reality that you were born into. Okay? And then you built your sense of self really around that sense of taste. Most people don't realize this. Alright? You find there are some people who have an extraordinary sense of taste. In terms of the variations that they can taste, and in terms of the type of food they're drawn to, you know. And that sense of taste is closely followed by the olfactory sense. The sense of smell. And when you find people who have very sophisticated sense of smell and taste, wow, there's a certain pleasure that they bring into life because they know how to connect with it. Because once those two are functioning correctly, the sense of vision follows as a close third. And so you find people with highly developed Venusian placements, right, to have this particular aesthetic quality to them. They understand what looks good, what tastes good, right? What sounds good. And usually these are the things that we look for in reality to arrange them, because when things look very, very good, especially in the type of societies that we have today, people are drawn to them because they look very beautiful. They look good, you know, in terms of when you impress upon those types of things or when you connect with them, they give you a feeling of goodness in terms of this must be good. I'm drawn to it. Maybe good music, good food, or even opportunities that are packaged in such a way that they look very fulfilling. That's the power of Venus. That's why the Venusian quality is the power to harmonize things. The similarity between things, to link them together into a much grander sense of meaning. Now, what happens when Aquarius needs to produce this Venus? Now, Venus rules Taurus, and Taurus is the second sign. Aquarius is an 11th sign, meaning it's more highly evolved than Taurus. Now, it doesn't mean it's more important. It just means that by the time you get to Aquarius, you have overcome most of the pressures of material existence, because the peak of that experience was in Capricorn. And you now begin to climb down from that peak, but not climbing down in the sense of losing functionality. Is that functionality begins to become more complex. It's no longer about just acquiring or achieving. Now it's about the ideals behind existence itself. What is the truth of existence? Because, you know, the best way to be able to think about the universe, life, and everything in it is to have a full belly, a full bank account, and all the pressures of achieving and whatever, all those things are behind you. Okay? You don't have a job to go to in the morning anymore. No pressure of a deadline or whatever. You can now begin to think about the ideals of existence itself. What constitutes these ideals? What is the truth? What is the real meaning behind life? That's why Aquarius is symbolized by the water bearer. just that the water that the bearer is pouring all over the world is not water per se, it's knowledge. But it's a very specific type of knowledge, because knowledge is typically signified by air. So why is it water in Aquarius? Well, the reason is very simple. There is a type of knowledge that connects to itself over and over and over again, so that it begins to mimic the way water is, so that it flows. Alright? The knowledge that does that, that's what we call consciousness. So Aquarius really is about the nature of consciousness, the truth of consciousness. Now, consciousness is a stream. It is the aggregate behavior of all these data points or information points, the trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of them. Now, on the base level of Taurus, what is being extracted from that is the way that it all blends together into a unique sense of taste, or a unique sense of smell, or a unique sense of touch. And this is why when you have Venus in Aquarius, there is a very great chance that one of your sense organs or one of your sense faculties is very highly developed. That is, it has been tuned into a very high tempo, very sophisticated, that it stands out as unusual. And if you can actually develop it, it should be able to shine. Because remember, Aquarius sits opposite Leo. So Leo is the individualized ego. Aquarius is that individualized ego in a social environment. So they're both driven by creative self-expression. But there's more. Much more. In Aquarius, it is more evolved than that, such that it is no longer these individual senses that are now important. It's the overall configuration and structure. What is the nature of consciousness itself? So that instead of thinking about these individual, sense organs per se, in their totality, what do they mean? And what are they telling me about the world that I live in? What are they saying about existence itself? What is the nature of reality? What is the universe? Where did it come from? Why does it have certain types of laws? Why does it have structure? Who made the laws? Where did it come from? How is it maintained? These are all Aquarian questions, because they're concerned with a higher level of understanding, that is a higher level of structure and meaning. And the essence of that structure and meaning is the nature of self-consciousness. Because whatever it is that you learn, it's not outside of you. When you learn it properly enough, it now becomes you. So that the process of actually understanding existence itself is the process of becoming existence. That's really how it works. And so the type of knowledge that Aquarius symbolizes is typified by a global kind of knowledge, a knowledge that is all encompassing about the structure and nature of truth itself. Now, most Aquarians spend their time thinking about strange things, in the sense that they're not really normal things that everybody thinks about. Why? Because they have crossed that level. They have gone beyond Capricorn. Now, Capricorn is where you want to display your peak material achievement. You want to demonstrate to the world the strength of your character, the strength of your ability. Now, when you've done that, what's next? You now start thinking about your humanity as a whole. Because the next stage after Aquarius is Pisces, and that's the nature of legacy. Because you are now preparing to get out of the material world entirely. So, you are concerned with what you're leaving behind in the world. But in Aquarius, you have one last hurrah. And the hurrah itself is enough to make a huge difference, because now you have the chance to give back to humanity. You have the chance to construct that legacy itself and put the finishing touches on it. Alright? So Aquarians are always concerned with the idealization of reality as a whole. The idealization of truth. Because the nature of the idealization of truth, that is the true nature of freedom. And the Aquarian is absolutely invested in freedom. It is the freedom from the concerns of the material world. That's really what it is, because they're beyond that now. They have gone into a reality system where those things are behind them. They are no longer questioning their worth in terms of, am I capable of achieving this or achieving that? They have achieved it. Now they are more concerned with what does it all mean in the context of everybody else's achievement. Because that's the place where they actually understand what they have contributed to the world. You see? So Venus in Aquarius is a pleasure vector associated with higher level ideals, which are only found in what others might consider the unusual. Because those ideals are not available to those who have not overcome the Capricornian experience yet. They're still trying to establish something in the world. They're still trying to be recognized in the world. They're still trying to recognize themselves, because that Capricornian recognition, it really is a recognition of the self, because it's the transformation of the narrative that reality is, such that you now have the narrative whereby you feel like there's a reality and an essential established part of that reality that is now acknowledging you. But there is no reality. They're only narratives. If you think I'm joking, try to figure out any aspect of this world that is not a narrative. When you find it, let me know. The only way you understand it is as a narrative, because that's the only thing your sense organs give you. They give you narratives because you are putting out narratives. That's it. Okay? So Venus in Aquarius is that pleasure vector that is drawn to those Aquarian narratives. Those narratives of a high idealization. Narratives that involve beyond the stream of consciousness itself into the global whole, as in, what is this universe? What am I doing here? They're drawn to astrology for that same reason, because they're trying to achieve or trying to garner this type of meaning on that level. So you want to know the type of people Venus and Aquarius are drawn to. They're drawn to very unusual people. Unusual doesn't mean that they're crazy or something like that. They're drawn to vanguards, people who have an unusual way of looking at the world, because intelligence connects with intelligence, just like truth connects with truth. So they consider themselves to be of a very high level in terms of that pleasure vector. And so they wouldn't go or be attracted to a level that is lower than that. They're drawn to those that are like them. So that the way that the Venus in Aquarius prefers to be loved is from that unusual perspective. You have to recognize the unusual nature of their intelligence in terms of where they're coming from. That fixed point of view that is literally the sum total of what can only be described as an ideation of reality. So Venus in Aquarius is the beauty of that ideation. And the essence of that beauty is the freedom to love and the love of freedom. And that's why you can describe the Venus in Aquarius as an idealistic lover in that sense. But it's not the idealism that drives the Venus in Aries, which is just, the idealism is on the level of, I'm alive, you're alive, let's make babies. In Venus in Aquarius, the idealism is on a much higher level, is on a level of truth, on a level of what the genuineness of freedom really feels like. And as such, they cannot enjoy conventional types of relationships. It's just too mundane for them. And so it's not unusual to have these people love across cultures, across boundaries, because they don't see those boundaries. They exist in a much higher level of dimensional space within their minds. So those boundaries don't exist for them. They love across very broad spectrums. Okay? And that's one of the things that typifies them very clearly. Aquarius is an 11-dimensional space. There are many coordinate axes that are interacting. And they all need to engage all of them. So conventional levels of relating and loving, they seem very much reduced to the Aquarian intellect. It needs a higher dimensional space in which to love. And so they come across as people who don't love on a feeling and personal level. But it's not true. They're very deeply loving people. They just love many data points about you, not just an emotional one. And you need to respond on an 11-dimensional space if you want to match with these people. You need to love that 11-dimensional data coordinates that they have. Meaning you need to be able to love them on all those levels. And there are very many of these levels. That's why they're exciting people. They're people who they spend a lot of time in the rarefied areas of their mind. So you need to engage those places. You need to engage their minds. Not just a book to read. You have to discuss these higher level concepts and philosophies. These higher level understandings of what is existence itself. Because remember, Aquarius is that stream of consciousness that's constantly flowing through your mind. You know, questions like, why are you conscious? Why are you self-aware? Now, you are self-aware because you know what you are. You can point to yourself and say, me, right? And you can decide to disobey that me. You can say, okay, me yesterday, I'm not going to be me today. I'm going to be something else. Now, there's no creature on this planet that can do that. That thing that allows you to be able to do that, that is what Aquarius is interested in. That's what drives the Aquarian. That's what they're looking for. They want to nail it down, precisely what it is. They want to understand how it actually emanates, where it's coming from. Now, What is the difference in that and Scorpio? Because Scorpio is also very interested in the truth of reality. But Scorpio feels it as a compulsive obsessiveness that is overwhelmed with emotion. Because Scorpio is missing a memory of something. That is, Scorpio can connect with a memory of a different reality pre-birth. But they do not connect with it in an intellectual way, so to speak. It is a very emotional thing because it's a memory, and it's an emotionally charged memory which they cannot resolve into anything. It's just there, and it drives them crazy because they are constantly trying to resolve it. That constancy is the nature of obsessive compulsiveness. That's not what the Aquarian feels. The Aquarian is trying to find the exact solutions and pathways to that thing that Scorpio wants to know. They want to be able to figure it out so that you can publish it in a journal, so to speak, and say, okay, this is what this thing is, or this is what it's not. That's why Aquarians are concerned with some type of objective type of knowledge. Now, think of this. People talk about Aquarius being a group thing. But the reality of the matter is that on that level, right, Aquarius, the only way you can relate to them is through these ideations. And these ideations are not personal things. Because anybody can come up with the ideations. You can figure it out. And you can even write it on a piece of paper. You can say, the love of freedom is liberty. You know, or something like that. Most of these quotes that people quote and all that, they're all Aquarian. You can say, the tree of liberty needs to be refreshed with the blood of the patriot. Or some nonsensical thing like that. Right? That is an Aquarian ideal. Those are the things that Aquarius are looking for. And on that level, such statements don't unite people emotionally. They unite them on a level of understanding that very few people can reach. That's why Aquarians tend to form these knowledge-based groups or conspiracy groups, whichever way you call them. Because if you look at the nature of conspiracy groups, for instance, right, they look like any other type of knowledge-based group. For instance, if you look at the set of all brain surgeons in New York, and there's something that relates them together, and it ain't personal. It's a specialized type of knowledge that they know, and that allows them to form a group. But conspiracy theorists are similar in the sense that there's something that's bringing them all together. There is an ideal that is driving them to seek camaraderie in each other. And usually that thing is an ideal. Now, the difference in the conspiracy group and the set of all brain surgeons in New York is that the set of all brain surgeons in New York is defined by a structure because Aquarius is a fixed sign. The conspiracy group is not. And that's why conspiracy groups are not effective. They are amorphous kind of things. So they can't really wield any power. Now, Aquarius is intellectual power. Because when the Aquarian group comes up with a notion of reality, everybody pays attention. See the difference? Nobody gives a damn about the conspiracy group because whatever it is that they're discussing is changing moment to moment. I mean, nothing can really be established or verified. Now, we are in the age of Aquarius, and officially it actually started with Pluto's ingress into Aquarius. And by the time Pluto's ingress into Aquarius is complete, at the end of this year, then that's the real beginning of the Aquarian age. And you need to understand the difference in Aquarius and Pisces. Everything that we know now, all the sciences and everything of human experience is really Piscean. Now you look at a country like the United States, it was founded on an ideal. Freedom, liberty, and all that, right? Well, it's Piscean. Why? Because it was not implemented according to that. Aquarius is an ideal that is actually implemented as a reality. And it draws its strength from the purity of that ideal. And so one of the dangers of Aquarius really is to become extremely idealistic, such that the concerns of the individual units are not taken into consideration at all. Just the group ideal is the only important thing. And when such things get out of hand, then you have things like fascism, Nazism, or even racism. But those are not real Aquarian ideals because they're really just the feelings of one or two members of society who are now inflated to seem like they serve the group purpose. But they're very dysfunctional, and you know this because they are dysfunctional. And that's one of the downsides of Aquarius. But when Aquarius is functioning correctly, it is an absolutely beautiful thing. And those with Venus in Aquarius, they are well stationed and well positioned to find that beauty in Aquarius, because the beauty is the convergence of idealisms into a purer truth. And the truth is liberating. That's the nature of it. Alright? Because take for instance, see the comparison. If you claim that America is an Aquarian country because it talks about freedom, how free are you really? You wake up every morning and you go to a job, you depend on a paycheck. Without that paycheck, you cannot live. Now, in that office or that corporate body that you work for, there is no democracy there. You do not vote on anything. And you spend most of your time paying attention to that and taking instructions from that. So where do you actually enjoy this freedom? Where is it? It's in the freedom of which grocery to buy. You don't have a choice there. You buy according to the wage you have been given. You buy according to the amount of money that you have been paid. And people are forced into different type of wage groups, which means that they are forced into different types of realities. And you can skillfully design these things so that you can discriminate amongst people. And that's what has been implemented. All of that is pie scheme because it's based on a lie. It's based on illusions. Things that don't seem the way they are. And that's not really what Pisces is. That's the dysfunctional form of Pisces. That's really what it is. So when we start the age of Aquarius proper, I have a podcast on Pluto's ingress into Aquarius part 1 and 2. It tells you the whole story. When we start the age of Aquarius properly at the end of this year, everything begins to change. For one thing, you cannot continue to lie to people. All those lies will be shattered. They will break down because something will start emerging within human consciousness from wherever it is these things come from, all the way from the subatomic level, all the way to your consciousness. They will come from there because God controls the entire world. You think your thoughts are your own? Well, I've just explained to you that your thoughts, what you consider to be your thoughts or your personal thoughts, they are an aggregate from trillions and trillions and trillions and trillions of data points that you don't control. You don't. It's one of the things that become apparent starting from the end of this year. You realize just exactly how screwed up you are as an individual, as a human, because you begin to realize, and this happens very quickly, starting from the end of this year. You begin to realize that your entire reality is built on a fraud. It's all built on a lie. Do you know what happens to people when they begin to realize that their entire reality is a falsehood? It's called rebellion. And it's one of the properties of Aquarius. And so Venus in Aquarius can be very rebellious. They will not conform to any established pattern of loving. You try to cage them, then you're making a mistake. It might work for a short while, but after a while, they're just going to turn the whole thing around. They will not be told how to love. They will not be boxed into a confined structure. They simply won't. Because it goes against everything that Vector is telling them. Aquarius needs to be free to indulge in its 11-dimensional state of experience. And those 11 dimensions are degrees of knowing. That's how vast the consciousness is. So, like belongs to like. If you have a Venus in Aquarius and you want to be loved properly, you have to connect with those who understand Aquarius. They have to be able to love you on that level. Because someone who is not on that level will absolutely be insecure with a Venus in Aquarius. Absolutely. Because they come across as very flirtatious. They move from group to group, people to people, in a non-personal way, really. Because they exist in a very high level of consciousness. So that what you consider to be sexual or intimate is very different for them. They are intimate on an 11-dimensional space. So if your intimacy revolves only around sex, then you don't have that much to really offer these people. They move on very quickly. Because when their vector points, it's taking them somewhere. It is designed to take them somewhere. Because Venus in Aquarius in your natal chart is tied to an overall collective story, which is always engaged. So if your vector is being impaired upon by maybe your surroundings or whatever, then it is impairing the flow, the thing that is supposed to take you to where you're going. And that's why when you understand your own natal chart, either through natal chart synthesis or whatever, then you can begin to understand the choices that you need to make, because it becomes very clear to you. You know where you have to go. You know what you have to do. That's really what it is. When Venus in Aquarius begins to go wrong, they rack up quite the body count. Because sex now becomes something of a plaything. It's more like the unconventional becomes too attractive. Because the individual is spooked by something mundane in their past, which they're running away from. Usually these things are part of an overall story. And they begin to drift. They have no permanent abode, no permanent connections. They have a wide range of platonic relationships that they flit from one to another. Usually, this is always part of some type of wider behavioral thing. It's not because that is what they really want to do. So, sometimes, even in the journey of Venus and Aquarius that is functioning correctly, these types of things are necessary as the individual is learning to come to terms with who they really are. Financially, the Venus in Aquarius needs to connect with Aquarian ideals. That's where your vector is. And those Aquarian ideals revolve around these understandings of truth. Research is perfect, excellent scientific research or social research, etc. Now, social research is very appealing to them. That's why these people are drawn to astrology. It's about the way the mind functions, because like I told you, that stream, that water that is pouring out from the Aquarian over the whole world is a stream of consciousness. So such things are very appealing to them. Social forms of finance, Bitcoin, cryptocurrencies, all these technological investments and all that, they're drawn to these types of things. And usually the reason is because they can imagine a supranational human organization wherein everything is decentralized. These are very strong Aquarian ideals, and they are drawn to these things like a moth is drawn to a flame. Alright? So you must be able to engage the Aquarian on this level if you really want to keep their interest. Otherwise you become boring and they just walk away. They find a way. So they're drawn to very unusual characters. And when I mean unusual, like I've said before, not insane or not the absolute fringe. When that happens, things are not working well. Usually what they're drawn to is this innate, advanced level intelligence. That's why most people think Venus in Aquarius is just a love for aliens or something like that. Extraterrestrial information, aliens, all the conspiracies you can imagine, especially conspiracies in the past. They're drawn to this idea of the pyramids as being something, really out of this world. If they don't find any excitement or stimulation for themselves, they will make these things up. That's why people join conspiracy groups. They need engagement on that level. They just can't find it in the mundane. And those Aquarian societies, like the set of all brain surgeons in New York, they're too exclusive. How do you get in? You need a very specific type of training and many years of experience to be part of that group. And so when you have this thirst and this yearning for knowledge on that level, but you don't have the discipline or the training to be able to engage on that level, then you join a conspiracy group and you guys indulge in all sorts of things. And it's about feeling the need or feeling the gap within the person. But if that Venus in Aquarius is tied to so many other things on a more standard and evolved level, then the individual suffers. Why? Because those things will never satisfy. And so the vector is lost. And so the individual begins to drift. That's really what it is. They don't seem to have any purpose. Why? Because your vector is off. That's really what it is.